Hello, everyone. S.J. Anderson here, live stream for this full moon in Capricorn moment. I'm glad to be with you, glad to be live streaming again. It's been a little while, I haven't done a live stream in several months. I think back in January was the last one I did, and I just decided to do another one. I think it's good to be able to just connect with an audience in real time and have more of that direct back and forth. So if you're here live with me today, thanks for being here, and it's glad to see you. If you're watching this in the replay, of course, this is also one way to take in this content. And that's one thing to say about the video. Let's just dive right in. I always use with these live streams. I like to have a PDF that I've made. This is just a way that it's kind of lecture style or academic style. One of my preferred ways to come into a moment of astrology. I was just going to say the exact date of this full moon that's upcoming, where we're right in the energy here. 22 June, 0107 UTC is the exact moment of the live stream. As I record, the moon is right in the middle of Sagittarius. So we have another 17, 16 degrees of the moon before it's full. But you look up in the night sky, I've been seeing it all week, and really the last quarter of the moon. It's really beautiful right in the evening, isn't it? Just to look up and see it. So check it out. You're probably seeing it tonight, seeing that big, beautiful, luminous moon. And, great way to do astrology is to interface visually, somehow just take in, even non-verbally, a moment in time. I'll be hanging out, just doing comments as we go. So hello, King. Hello, Rania. Hello, Athena. Hello, Christine. Great to see everybody here. So let's just keep going. Let's just push through. What this video will be organized into, and what I was just saying, is that if you watch this after the full moon, there's still a lot of ephemeris contextualization I'm going to do at the beginning of this video that's highly relevant for preparing for the astrology over the next 2 or 3, 4 months. I kind of like to, when I talk about any moment of astrology, put it in context, because without the context, it loses its ability to communicate with us. And so knowing what we know about what will come helps us process more fully exact moment. So I'm going to do a lot of that in this video. So you can always keep watching, even if you're like a week after the full moon. There's still a lot of good stuff here, I think, for you. Then we'll come into just delineating the full moon a little bit of a derived houses delineation, which I always like, as you know, if you follow my content. Hello, Shannon. What's going on? Helen, hi. Then we're going to do an election for the waning phase, just as I normally do in the other videos I've been releasing, that it's kind of organized similarly to those. And then I'll do some questions and answers at the end. I'll probably try to answer questions as well during the video, just to keep it, light and relaxed here. So let's just keep moving here. First thing I want to say is that this moment that we're in, this current moment where you have, and actually I've skipped ahead, but we'll come back to the full moon chart over and over again. But it's a less dynamic, less intense astrology, meaning that there's not as much happening that's triggering or intensified. Really, what we mean by that astrologically is squares and oppositions, and this current moment has less of those. So let me just go back actually to the chart. Here's the full moon chart, and you see how, the moon is always opposite the sun, but with the other planets, Saturn and Pisces, Mars and Taurus, and then the Cancer stellium, there's just sextile, 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 trine Mars moon, trine Saturn to the Cancer stellium. So it's very free flowing and almost restful in a way, with so many planets forming sextiles and trines in these night sex signs. And that's just very important, I think, to consider right here, late June, early July, and it'll become a major theme of this video, just how much softer it might be, all things, else considered or notwithstanding in a way. And so that said, it is a full moon, can be intensities. I know for me, it's been a little jarring the last few days as this moon's becoming full. I think a lot of that has to do with the Jupiter Saturn square that we're right in the middle of, the Jupiter in Gemini, Saturn and Pisces square that's building and building, though that is still not as intense as it will be in something like late July and August. August sees a full Mercury retrograde. Mercury will station retrograde on 5 August in Leo, or in Virgo, and then it stations direct on 28 August in Virgo. So it goes from, it stations retrograde in Virgo and comes back into Leo to station direct. So this Mercury retrograde will be over here. It will go here and then back here. So you can see the chart that I have on this slide is the 4 September moment that Mars enters Cancer. But Mercury will have station direct like a week earlier, still in Leo, getting ready to re-enter Virgo. And Mars will have its full retrograde on the 6th of December 2024, and then it stations direct on the 24th of February 2025. So we have a full Mars retrograde that comes at the end of the year and into 2025. But by sign, that Mars retrograde energy starts on the 4th of September. That's the chart I have here. Just as Mars enters Cancer, Mars will enter a sign that it won't leave until 18 April 2025. And so, we're beginning to get into this major grind energy that happens at the end of 2024, let alone, the eclipses that come and other transits. And so the main point here is just that this moment of time may be a little bit softer. And I just would encourage everybody to appreciate the little moments of softness you may be able to find here, because the astrology is telling us that this is kind of it in a certain way. So, hey, let me come back in here. Hey, Helen. Hey, from Arizona. Nick, what's up? Hello, everyone. Yeah, peace and power to all of you guys just hanging out here, talking astrology. So here's the next slide. And this is about August and the entry of Mars into Gemini on the 20th of July. As soon as Mars enters Gemini on the 20th of July, we begin by sign the Mars-Saturn square. Always potentially rough energy when you have Mars and Saturn squaring off. So that will start by sign on the 20th of July, but it peaks here in August. 16 August, you've got Mars square Saturn, and then 19 August, Jupiter will perfect its first square to Saturn of this opening square of their cycle. And so things are just overall way more intense later in this summer, late July into August, and then September's eclipse, the first eclipse season, the first eclipse. It's just this context, I think, is necessary to help this appreciation of where we are in June, late June, and into this first little part of July, just how much softer it is, in my view, compared to what's coming. Yeah, cherish any soft sweetness, 100%. Amanda, hi from Spain. Hi, hello. Hola there to you in Spain. So, okay, the next slide. September sees the first of these two lunar eclipses. I just mentioned that on the last slide. But look at this eclipse chart. It's the first eclipse in Pisces of 3 lunar eclipses that will happen in Pisces. The final eclipse there is in August 2026. And so we have every late summer, starting this year, a lunar eclipse in Pisces. There's no solar eclipses in Pisces during this nodal cycle through Pisces, the North Node in Pisces. But this kicks open what I think will be, some real red flag energy, frankly. I mean, in my, course of being around astrology, studying astrology, interfacing with astrology, I've learned that whenever Saturn combines with an eclipse energy, it's really something to consider majorly for a massive kind of change and massive fated change. Another way to say it is that you have a grinding Saturn and Pisces story that we've all been dealing with for about 18 months or however long now, 15 months. Now the eclipses come to invert, subvert, and alter that in some major ways potentially. And so that this comes in September, and we're less than, as upon recording, we're less than 3 months from this moment. It just helps me understand how much appreciation I'm for this time when we don't have this energy, we don't have these hard squares or eclipses. So, okay. Yeah, Pisces eclipses should for sure be interesting because it changes that Saturn story. And so we get like a curveball for this grinding Saturn new foundational process that we've all been in. Now, I've loved Saturn and Pisces, loved a bunch about it, but, it's definitely difficult. You can't escape the difficulties of Saturn. Not all difficulty should be avoided. Difficulty can be embraced as a virtue. And we're going to talk a lot more about that theme in this video. But the other point, major point, is we have 2 full moons in Capricorn in 2024. So this is not just a single Capricorn full moon on 22 June here in less than 2 days. We actually get another one on the 21st of July, 1017 UT. And so we're not going to escape this idea of the Capricornian. The Capricorn sector of our house takes primary relevance because of these two full moons there. And the last time this happened was last year. Remember that eclipse in Aries, the first of the Aries solar eclipses? Well, we had a new moon in Aries the month before that eclipse. And so you might just think about last year. It was March and April, and how your Aries sector was accentuated with the new moon and the eclipse there, where we'll get that now in our Capricorn sector. And so, just consider it. The main thing and the main difference, between these two full moons is the second full moon is a lot more challenged. Like I was talking about earlier, you have Mars in Gemini with this second full moon in Capricorn, and Mars then squaring Saturn by sign. And now we're building into the Mars-Jupiter conjunction square Saturn moment that defines August. That next full moon in Capricorn, that's baked in, because what are the ruling planets of Capricorn? Mars by exaltation, Saturn by domicile. They're squaring each other in this next full moon chart. Also in this second full moon in July, you have Mercury in shadow. See, it's right at the end of Leo. It enters Virgo and then stations retrograde on the 5th of August, those dates we had just looked at. And so we're getting into like those final moments before Mercury does its thing and stops, and then the Mars-Saturn square triggers in August. I think August is a real high energy month and a potentially volatile month. And that's not now. And you can compare this chart now. You can see here's all of the free-flowing trines and sextiles, minor grand trines, and 2 minor grand trines, you might say, in these night sex signs. A lot less dynamic energy for late June, early July. Okay, so let me hear 6-month plans. I'm not sure exactly what you mean. Yeah, 6-month plans, every 6 months we have eclipse seasons. And so it's good to sometimes ride eclipse waves and try to plan for, every 6 months of the life. That can be a good syncopation, I think. Half of a year, check in with your birthday, half birthday kind of thing. But this softer energy does extend into this next new moon in Cancer, which is also still with Venus. You see it. And even though Mercury has left the mix, Mercury in some ways is nicer here. It's visible. It's a morning star, or it's an evening star rather, invisible. But you still get that homey Cancerian nurturance by this full moon. And Mars is sextile, Saturn is trine. So it's not too as harsh in a certain way. Now there is a lunar nodal square, which is another layer here during this whole period. I'm like, it's softer, but you notice I'm not saying it's the softest energy. It's still a little bit rocky, because we're actually triggering the eclipse stories all month, all of Cancer season, with both the Capricorn full moons and then the new moon in Cancer. And that's a primary theme, checking in with everything that's happened in your life from April 2020 with the first eclipse in Aries, and then that will complete in March 2020. April 2023 with the first eclipse in Aries, the final eclipse in Aries, and the final eclipse in the axis is in March 2025. So we're right halfway into those eclipse cycles in the Libra-Aries axis, because this new moon and these two full moons are what we call angular to the lunar nodes. We're pinging those stories, not directly, but sort of indirectly. And either way, that does provide a little bit of a heightened sense of tension potentially, even though I'm saying, hey, it's softer, but not softest. All right. Let's just keep going. And I want to talk about the two full moons of Capricorn. So any full moon in Capricorn, and this is another major theme of the moment, reminds us of the winter, because the zodiac is just a clock, and the sun moves at a pretty normal pace, a pretty fixed pace through the degrees of the zodiac, the 360 degrees of the zodiac, just like a clock. It's the great timing piece, especially when you consider the tropical zodiac, because we time the zodiac to the movement of the sun and the light that's available from the sun. And so anytime you have the moon opposite the sun, you're actually projecting out 6 months into the future, when the sun will be in the same degree as where the moon is full. In this case, it is the peak of winter, or the kickoff of winter, right? The winter solstice. And so it's like a yin yang, where this moment, I think, is the moon reminding us, hey, it's going to be really cold in the winter. And so, appreciate the sun right now. I am having a lot of gratitude for the solar energy. I mean, it's really burning hot in certain places, but hey, it's going to be super cold. And so I think we can take it for what it is and have a little bit of gratitude of how much sun is out there and the things you can do when it's sunny. Or I know if you're down under, that's flipped. have gratitude for the cold months where it's not brutally hot where you are, and you can have the things we do in the cold seasons, and so anyhow, that's just always baked into every full moon. But I think I like to bring it up in the summer or winter because those are the extremes of light. And so we're reminded of the opposite extreme, like the yin and the yang. Let's see, Cappy Moon Gal here. Okay, yep. And so you might, you might relate to a lot of what else we're going to talk about here when we really dive into the Cap Moon symbolism. Okay, when was Capricorn last a major player in our astrology? That's also what becomes the corollary question when you have two full moons or two new moons, like in Aries last year, but two full moons in the same sign. The first thing we might say, well, what happened in that sign somewhat recently in our recent past? When was it greatly centered? And look at the extremely rare configuration, March 2020. This was the epic Capricorn pileup that we all lived through. And this was the conglomeration that ushered in the COVID crisis. You had, even take out Pluto-Saturn conjunction. I know everybody wants to talk about the Pluto-Saturn conjunction for that moment, but if you remove Pluto, having the South Node, Mars, Jupiter, and Capricorn the South Node, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn all in Capricorn. The last time those 4 points met was like 500 AD, right around that collapse of the Roman Empire. And so that was extremely rare. And actually what you're looking at here is the Aries ingress. And so to have in the Aries ingress that very rare Mars, Saturn, Jupiter, South Node, and Capricorn conjunction, it was a very harsh energy that triggered this major Capricornian mess. And then you put Pluto, Saturn in, and that accentuates the Capricorn even more. And so, maybe we're pinging this. I mean, there's another thing, 2020, there you go, Wandlung. And that is, we're pinging this. There is another technique in mundane astrology where the Aries ingress that happens before the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, this is the chart for the next 20 years. And that's also something to consider, that this Capricorn pileup is potentially the root chart that we're going to have until 2040. I believe. I think it is the year 2040 when we get a new Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. And so to have two Capricorn moons here, one triggering that Saturn exactly, and then one pretty close to that South Node, we're brought back to 2020. Now check out the headlines. I don't know if you all are following this, but we have all over the news this thing, action needed. I'm just reading headlines from Brave browser, the browser I use. Type in bird flu news. Action needed now on H5N1 avian flu. The stakes are enormous. Opinion, this is New York Times. How scared should I be of the bird flu? Look, I'm not a fear monger, so maybe you shouldn't be scared, but I'm just trying to map these mundane shifts. Focus on your health. I mean, that goes without saying. The next pandemic could be from a bird flu, former CDC chief says. People are watching the evolution of bird flu. I don't know if you all saw those memes that went around during the Super Bowl, but the 2020 Super Bowl were the same two teams, the Kansas City Chiefs and the team they beat, the 49ers, the same two presidential candidates, Biden, Trump. So there's this whole 2020, 2024 echo synchronistically in our current moment. And maybe this bird flu or pandemic talk is some kind of other echo with that. Let's hope it doesn't get as crisis level as what happened in 2020. And I'm not even saying that it will, but it's just the symbols of Capricorn beg these explorations, and the astrology is telling us to look there. Part of why 2020 and the Capricorn pileup brought in the pandemic prediction that Andre Barbeau made is that Capricorn is a earth sign. So we're dealing with the material formulations, we're dealing with the physical body, the moon ruling Capricorn by night triplicity, and it's a Saturn and Mars ruled sign. So Capricorn is kind of the harsh earth energy, the harshness of the body and the harshness of our physical manifestations. And so that might be some of these echoes as these H1N1 stories, come into the forefront. I saw this from Newsweek. I think this is the one that was really scaring people. CDC issues update. There was an H5N2 bird flu strain that killed a man in Mexico. I'm not even sure. I'm not even co-signing any of this, just to be clear, you all out there. But, I think one way to do reality is seeing what these mainstream headlines are saying allows us to kind of surf what's being projected into our frames and in our consciousness as the way to kind of psychically prepare for things, setting aside anything else. I'm not even saying I would trust these institutions. Let's just be clear. I don't want to assume that I am by bringing these headlines, but bird flu pandemic, New York Times, in people, here's what it might look like. So they're already kind of setting up this in the headlines, and we have to just be prepared for it. So let me see here. I started the Forest Garden Plant Nursery in 2020. Beautiful. So Mostala, maybe you'll have something here with these two full moons in Capricorn checking in with that plant nursery. That sounds really cool. Intense rite of passage personally, absolutely. And that was a huge, intense rite of passage. Let me just come back here. A major collective rite of passage. This rare pile up in Capricorn. And we all stepped into our future, right? There was no turning back. And we're living in the wake of that still. And the consequences of that moment are still reverberating with everything that's happening in our reality. So this could be, and I appreciate Vera Dawn, this is a great time, in my view, to check in with everything that's happened for you this 4 years into the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction cycle. These are 20-year cycles with a 10-year opposition. And I remember astrologer Stephen Arroyo, famous astrologer, and I think Liz Green, there's a famous series of talks they did in the 80s, I think late 70s, 80s, that are published in a book. I don't have that title right on the tip of my tongue here, but he laid out the history of Saturn and Jupiter and how every 20 years it triggers new unfoldment. So you had like World War II into the 1940, 1960. That was like World War II, post World War II. 1960, 1980, that's the crazy 60s, and then the kind of come down of the 70s. 1980 to 2000 is the computer 80s, and then the beautiful 90s. I say that because I'm a 90s, I grew up came into an adulthood in the late 90s. So I have a real affinity for that, but pre-internet, kind of the old world. 2000 to 2020 was 9/11, internet takes over. And now we're in this new 20-year phase, and we're 4 years into it. This series of full moons, I think, is a great check-in time. So wonderful. Thanks, Vera Dan, for that, because I think it's very, very pertinent. So yeah, the Great Reset, whether it's the one that's been written about, or even just energetically, the Great Astrological Reset. Our whole energy gets reset every 20 years. And anyhow, this isn't a Jupiter-Saturn video. That there's so much that's been done on that. It's fascinating. Maybe I should do some more work on that because of how excited I get when I talk about it. But let's come back in. 2 full moons in Capricorn. Now I want to start layering in at least some of the symbolism. We've got your own labor and physical struggles, right? The struggle of the material world. And, that's what Capricorn is. It's long-term struggle, Saturn, and then it is Mars, the exaltation lord. It's like the efforting for some kind of long-term struggle. It's like the Sisyphusian task we may be undertaking. And, there can be great joy, wisdom, and virtue in hard work. I remember when a friend of mine, when I was in my early 20s, he's just like, listen, man, industry is a virtue. And I remember that changed the way I viewed my labor and my efforting periods in life. I was like, hey, this is just virtuous. I can work hard. Like, it's a good thing. Maybe that's some Protestant work ethic stuff. I am an American, and that's part of the culture there. But still, I think we can consider that with Capricorn, how our labors can be noble, and how there's fruits that are born when we stick with action over long periods of time. And I think this Capricorn moment can help us figure out our rhythms of effort. Might be one major theme. And, I like this moon. It's, like I said, sextile, it's domicile ruler, trine, it's exaltation ruler. And then it's got the beautiful Cancer stuff that is also baked into this mix. Both full moons in Capricorn, and this is some more contextualization and mundane stuff that I still want to stay on. They have Saturn in the degree of its retrograde station. So Saturn right now is not retrograde, but it's in the degree of its station, 19 degrees. And that second full moon in July, 21 July, Saturn will be retrograde, but still at 19 degrees. That's how slow Saturn is. It takes a long time to, in that same degree, and then to station retrograde, and then to move backwards out of that degree. And why that's important is, let's see here. We've got Saturn stations are triggers. They trigger pivots in the reality. They mark important moments in the reality. Saturn being the final visible planet that's slowest moving. So when it stops, it's like the slow moving nature of reality can pivot as Saturn pivots. And this is an ancient mundane technique taught to me by Ben Dykes. He has a whole thing on it. But check out what's going on in the news ever since Saturn entered the 19 degrees Pisces degree. It happened in like, I think 8 June, and it's still there. But we've had all of these escalations in the Ukraine war, major news headlines around Ukraine war stuff. I'm going to look at a few here on the next slide. We've had all these AI advancements with Apple, for example. We'll see that in the next slide. And so these are the kind of pivots that this Saturn station, I think, is pulling us into. And they align with the idea that Saturn is a ruler of Capricorn, the initiations of the material, right? Capricorn is an earth sign. When Saturn changes, that we get a new initiations in our earth. And I think that's part of what's happening too, and why mundane astrologers are focusing on the pivots of Saturn to understand new change, cardinal earth moments. Okay, so here's these slides. Look at this. I mean, I don't know if you've been following this. This is so wild. So the war between Russia and Ukraine is set to grind on, as they had this diplomatic conference that the AP says packed a little punch. And how could it have packed a punch? You don't even invite the other party that would need to negotiate, right? So it was more of some kind of show and less a serious, diplomatic thing. I saw some commentator saying it was more setting up for escalation, actually. But right before this conference, you saw Russia came out and said, here's our terms. And so, the major war of the two major wars we have, the war in Palestine and then the war in Ukraine and Russia, these Saturn stations are bringing us into a major moment where the whole world is talking about it. In terms of AI, you see Luma AI, this company, and there was another Chinese AI company, I can't think of the name, but they create this video, they release an app where you can just type in words and say, make a video. Like, this could be the prompt, blonde woman in sunglasses walking down the street. You just press enter and it makes these videos that are pretty darn good, and so I think this has to do with the new foundations, the creative foundations of Saturn and Pisces, that AI, creating anew with AI, that we're on this cusp of some major AI stuff that's going to kind of change all of reality. So to see stuff like this emerging as Saturn stations, to me, is very, very important. Intensification of current longstanding difficulties, add script, wonderful delineation. Longstanding difficulties, that's Saturn. And when it stops, it's an intensification. So that's a perfect little phrase for any Saturn station. And we don't have to consider it. Let's see, AI is the woman in the red dress, that script. Yeah, that's a Matrix reference for anybody who doesn't know about that. But it's like, watch the woman in the red dress, and Neo's watching that woman in the red dress, and then it distracts him. And, there's all kinds of women in the red dress happening. I would argue that that's baked into all reality, AI or not, internet or not. There's really a metaphysical inquiry where we would have to dive into what is reality itself. But I do think that AI, I mean, my opinion is that it will become increasingly important one way or the other. So, okay, here we go. These other more headlines. This just happened. So after that conference in Switzerland, Kim Jong-un and Putin met, and they signed a mutual defense pact. When I saw that, I mean, this is, you pick up any history book and you read like history of World War I, history of World War II. It always starts with the years leading up and all of the mutual defense pacts that get signed by the countries. Because then what will happen is something triggers, for example, the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand triggers, then the mutual defense pacts come into play, and then it all unfolds. Or World War II, there was the pact, I believe it was the British had a pact with Poland to defend Poland. And so when the Soviets and the Nazis simultaneously invade, or pretty quickly one after the other, Britain declares war on the Nazis because of the pact. And so these pacts are very important setups. And we're getting one now as Saturn is stationing. And there was another one, I think Putin just went to Vietnam. And then you have a few with Ukraine. I forgot who just signed a pact with Ukraine. I can't recall. But so it's all these pieces are setting up. And again, I'll just say this here, because I don't want to participate with my astrology like in, accelerating these kind of mainstream narratives as reality is being created with these kind of mainstream stories. And I think we have choices for how much we want to co-create different, narratives. I mean, I do believe we have that power. I don't think it's like totally ignore stuff, but I think we have to be also careful. Like I want to hold out for divine intervention and peace to win over, or some kind of events that will change the game. And I think, maybe follow the Berlin Wall moment or something that happens, Jupiter and Gemini in 89, and everything changes after that. There's like a crisis, and then that Berlin Wall, boom, and now we're in a whole new world. I'm hoping for something like that can take us off the war timelines. And here's that Apple AI touts AI intelligence. They ink the deal with ChatGPT. So all of you Apple phone users, which are usually like the literati or the creative classes, are going to be way more integrated with OpenAI now. And again, Saturn station. And we're seeing big changes that I think will increasingly define where reality is going. All right, let's keep pushing. I've already talked about this, but here we go. The June full moon is more free flowing with those minor grand trines, but in 2 moon ruled signs, right? Taurus, where Mars is, and then the 3 planets in Cancer. So both of those are the moon signs, Taurus and Cancer. And you have 4 of the 7 traditional in those lunar signs. And they're aspecting and flowing supportive aspects. And so that's what I was talking about earlier about the softness that I think is at least part of this moment. And so take advantage of the easier energy. I won't repeat everything I just said earlier. And I'm just, you can see that other chart just as a comparison. And, there you go. All right, let's come a little bit more into some of the derived houses of the full moon. And all this means is that wherever the moon is in a new moon or full moon chart, you place the moon then in the first whole sign house. And so that's a way to delineate a moment in time. And so, the moon in Capricorn in this chart here is the first house. And now all of these planets can be also combined with house topics because they are, for example, Saturn is 3rd house from the moon. And so that tells us the relationship between Saturn and Pisces to the moon. And so it gives us another layer of delineative power. And this can be collective delineation. You can do this for the collective because for all of us, Saturn and Pisces is in the 3rd house from the full moon. And everybody will experience that. Now, we all have different charts, right? If you are a Leo rising, then you have the 6th, 8th there. So that would be about your story. That's a separate process of delineation. And then you would also have to look into your actual chart and see what's happening. What does Capricorn mean for you? What does Pisces mean for you? And that custom natal chart analysis. You can't do that in a video like this because it would just go on and on and on and on to do well. That's what readings are for. That's what working one-on-one with someone's for. But that said, you can do these kind of collective derived houses from the moon delineations, and that's why I do these. But let's come back in. Okay, the moon holds significant sway in the chart because it rules the Cancer stellium. So we know the moon is assigned a ton of responsibility, and it rules Mars. So that's how important this Capricorn moon is. I mean, we're having to give what I'm about to show you impacts all of these other planets. And, the moon, again, I wanted to say this as an initial point as well, is that when you have the ruling planets of Capricorn, Saturn and Pisces, and then by exaltation, Mars and Taurus and Pisces, what are they? They're Venus ruled signs. So that's how important Venus also is in this moment because it's ruling every planet as well, except for Jupiter. And so it's creative, it's creativity. There's something about creativity in the moment. And I want to bring in this Ethan Hawke video. I don't know if you've seen this, anybody. It goes around all the social media platforms. I've screenshotted this from Reddit, but I've seen it on a bunch of other platforms. And he talks about the necessity, that's a Saturn keyword, so Capricorn, of art and creativity, all the Venus ruling everything in our lives. And he says here, this is a long video, but he says, and all of a sudden you're desperate. And what he's referring to here is when we're in pain. Moments of pain, deep pain and emotional pain. That's when art becomes actually necessary. Most people are like, why read poetry? Why look at a painting? Who cares? Why read a novel? Well, Ethan Hawke's point is that there's times in our lives where we're hurting and we're desperate and we have like open wounds that only the art can treat that. And so I have here art and creativity are emphasized as necessary outlets for processing intense, painful moments and emotions. That's that moon in Capricorn, right? Pain. And so paraphrasing Ethan Hawke, art becomes crucial in moments of deep emotional pain, helping us articulate our experiences. And that's a big part of this moment. I want to come back in here just to, so you all understand why I focused on pain and emotional pain. Well, the moon in Capricorn is a sign that kind of hard for the moon. I mean, the moon is about comfort. The moon wants safety and comfort. Well, Capricorn's Mars and Saturn, it's coldness and throttling of action. And so it's not a sign that's known for being quite comfortable. And so to have the moon there, art alchemy, most definitely. I mean, using the art, those kind of arising, those moments where art meets us, where we are to heal and to give us a voice, to speak to our pain. There's only art that can do that. And But anyhow, this symbolism of the moon, I have here themes of vulnerability, right? We're exposed and vulnerable. Exposure is a key word for Saturn in the ancient text. Read Valens, he's like exposure. And so it's like our emotions and our body and our desire for comfort is all exposed when the moon's in Capricorn. And, that's why I'm saying if you're feeling pain and you're feeling some of that exposure, it's relying on Venus. Saturn ruled by Venus, Mars ruled by Venus. All of the Cancer placements ruled by Venus by day triplicity. Moon actually ruled by Venus by day triplicity. Venus is given a lot of responsibility, and these trines and sextiles also are very supportive. What is the moon? The mother and home, comfort, safety, and the need for nurturance. Then in Capricorn, it's vulnerabilities, how we express and maybe withhold needs, or how we don't have those needs met, exposure, etc. And this is the one thing I really want to bring in here as well, is childhood memories and patterns, reflections on family history. I think of any of the signs of the zodiac, Capricorn is about our histories in the family, because often that's the source of our pain. Any book on trauma is going to talk about family. Anytime you go into some kind of mental health facility or treatment center, they're going to start talking about family histories as a way to process you into their, treatment plans, etc. So it's the roots and the past histories. That's Capricorn of the family. And that's the moon. And that's a big, big, big theme. And it's often the source of our pain, And so, if that's coming up for you right now, I would just encourage you, safely with healthy people that love you and can nurture you, or, as the doses that are large enough for you to handle, getting back into some of your family of origin work. This might be a perfect month to do that, to prepare for all of the more fast moving triggers that happen later in the year. And I have here Capricorn is the only Saturn ruled sign that the moon also rules. So it's night triplicity. Moon rules Capricorn. Saturn rules Aquarius. Saturn rules Libra as well by exaltation here and domicile here, and then Gemini by triplicity. And so it's for Saturn, it's all air element stuff, outer world ideas, right? Except for Capricorn. And that's when you get the histories of the earth, the histories of the body, the histories of the container of emergence, aka family mom, right? That's what the moon is. And in Capricorn, it's the histories of that. And the moon is also exiled there. So that's also why it's tougher. This idea of a planet opposite the sign it rules being in an unknown territory or being opposite of what it's used to. And that's why I was saying earlier, it's like this is the nurturance, Cancer. When the moon is opposite the sign of nurturance, it's in the sign of without nurturance. And those are Saturn themes, exposure, labor, rough stuff can come in with Saturn. And so the moon is opposite and having to face what it is the opposite of its nature. So, okay. That's why I brought that Ethan Hawke thing in, because if that's happening for you, this idea of the moon being in a little bit of a harsh zone, that art can be a savior. And so, I should have maybe put the Ethan Hawke stuff after this moon slide, but oh well. And here's the next slide, just to make it exactly apparent what I'm talking about. Moon is in the first house. Okay. Saturn is in the third house, Mars in the fifth, and then the stellium in the seventh from the full moon. And what are these house topics? This is the self. The third house is the siblings. The fifth house is the children. And the seventh house is the spouse partner. And so you see how by derived houses were brought also. It's not just that Capricorn and the moon there can be our family histories. It's that the house topics are family, relatives, children, spouse. These are all deep family home style themes. And so those houses also call into consideration, like, where do we fit with our, children and siblings and spouse? And is that painful? And is that challenging? Is that triggering our wounds and our histories? And so anyhow, I know this is kind of intense topically. So if I don't want to trigger anybody out there going too deeply into like the idea of family of origin work, but just to bring the topic in without, and we can kind of move out from it. But it's just undeniably built into this moment. And, it's, okay, Raina, perfect. Yeah. Check out that art. Maybe something will emerge there for you. And that concert will bring in something that can kind of soothe you somehow if you're feeling, like you're needing that. By the whole sign rulership index, this is the index I developed, and I always have it on my website. But in this full moon, you see the Venus and moon are assigned the most responsibility, because everything is in night sex signs. And the sun has no responsibility over anything in this chart. The sun is not, no, and that another way of saying that is that no planets of the 7 are in solar ruled signs by any form of rulership. And so that means that the sun is giving itself over to selflessness, the sun being ourself, our consciousness. In this chart, we don't need that. In fact, we need to let the sun give into that more lunar and that healing story that dominates this moment. And that also might be a way in here, just kind of, set ourselves aside, go out and see what others need is, this idea of de-emphasizing the selfhood. And that can be useful sometimes, like, especially for processing pain. It's like, all right, let me forget about my story and my stuff for like an hour and go walk around and see maybe who else is out there and who I might be able to serve or add value to. Good. I'm glad you're feeling grounded right now, Slugbug. Yeah, I think the astrology is indicative of groundedness, and I'm happy that you're feeling that. So, okay, let's keep coming in here. The importance of nurturing relationships, especially those closest to you, and Capricorn, Cancer, Moon, Venus, reception. I wanted just to come in here. Over Capricorn, Venus is the detriplicity lord. Over Cancer, the moon is the domicile lord. And so there's some kind of fusion of reliance with Venus and the moon in the chart. The Venus is only a few degrees away from the sun. And so a few degrees away from that opposition. I mean, it's brought right into this mix, Venus. And I think this suggests, again, the self-other theme. And it gives us that opportunity to reflect on how relationships contribute to mutual well-being. That's a key word. And everything I was saying earlier about our own family of origin processing, the reason to do that is sometimes not even for our own healing, but it's so that we can actually be there for others. When we have baggage that is unresolved, it actually prevents us from having, healthy dyadic exchange. And so I think that's something to just consider here. It's like mutual well-being. It's the other and us, and how there's rulership back and forth between the 1st and 7th in the chart. And so, anyhow, thinking about our relationships and mutual well-being, are they nurturing, compassionate, and a container for witnessing pain? And, you might want to consider who is safe around you and who needs you to be their safe person, as much as finding people that are your safe person, to just kind of let your innards out a little bit and just be vulnerable to someone else who's capable of receiving that, or being called to receive that from another person. Okay, that's right here in the chart with that reception. Let me see here. Nick Cave's doc on AI. Okay, I have to check that out. Is that a new doc? Has he released a new doc on AI? I really admire Nick Cave, and I would really be curious to see if he's coming out and is helping us, process the AI moment. Wow, that's pretty cool. I'll check into that. I'll research that. Art alchemy, generational trauma, root work. Yeah, I think that's a perfect word here. Generational trauma, root work for Capricorn full moons. And especially when you have so much support in the aspects to, like, it's like a green light to maybe go into some pain for healing. And sometimes it's just time for that, and I think this might be a moment, if there ever was one, where it could be time for that. So, okay, Mars and Taurus. Now we're going to come to that ruler. We're just doing Venus and the moon. Now we're talking a little about Mars and Taurus. Only a couple more slides, I think. So just hang here with me. We'll be done here soon, and then we can have more questions at the end. But so this is a subdued energy. Mars is the fiery action. No orders from headquarters, just move into your power with what you want to do, basically. Drive and acting on the drive. In Taurus, it's subdued, it's calmed, and it's required to stay a little bit more relaxed and restrained, but yet persistent, like a fixed sign. So I wonder how much this Mars and Taurus is bringing us into more of a sensitive place, considering others, considering how unified or connected we are to others, how our action may reverberate with others, or how our action is needed. This is a great way to delineate Mars. Whatever sign it's in, you just say action for the purpose of that sign. So Mars is action for art and for home protection and for pleasure with people we love, right? So it's kind of protecting our home and our loved ones and protecting our creativity, especially being in the 5th house and in the creative sign of Taurus. Slowing down, maybe taking things slower, letting them unfold on their own timing, trusting the process. allowing things to develop as they're needing to develop. Some outcomes require time. There's the only way we can get things with certain outcomes is letting time do its magic. And I think Saturn in Taurus it could be about that. It's just staying fixed with these creative projects here maybe. And even if we're not able to act with as much of a burst as we're used to, don't worry, Mars will get powerful again in a long, long time. A long time before Mars gets some power. That will be fall 2025, before it gets domicile, exaltation, or any kind of domicile or exaltation rulership. So, that's a whole nother topic. But let me come back in, and that's because of a full retrograde in Leo Cancer. It'll be 10 months, over 10 months of Mars either in Cancer or Leo. And that starts 4 September and that ends 18 June 2025. So from 4 September to 18 June, it's only Mars right here. And that's a whole nother video, but I'm bringing it in because we're talking about Mars and subdued action and kind of letting things take time. That's going to be a major theme for Mars and for all of us for a while, because of what's about to happen with this Mars retrograde. So, okay, let me just keep going to the next slide. It's on Hulu. Okay, I'll check it out on Hulu. Thanks. I'll Google that in a second. And when I'm done here, I'm really curious about that. So, okay, let's come back in. This is the final planet that I want to check out from Derived houses, and that's Saturn in Pisces, domicile lord of Capricorn. And I think about the third house. It's a number of things, but one of the core topics, house of the goddess, house of the temple goddess, the temple workers. And in the ancient system, it was some of those localized spiritual forms. And I always think about it as like the house of psychotherapy or the house of like psychedelic therapy, if, not advocating that, but if you do that as a way to connect, or the house of spiritual disciplines that we do in our own homes or our altars, that's all the third house. And so to have Saturn there, this calls to mind maybe sticking with spiritual discipline or related longer term commitments or processes that we're undergoing with our spiritual practice. I mean, everybody's got, either you don't have one or you have something maybe, or, maybe you don't think about it at all. But for those of you who do, there's always a question of what's your routines for spirit, whether that's prayer, meditation of a certain style, or different rituals you do, or whatever you're doing, like yoga, or maybe it's not any kind of religious practice, but other practices of self-knowledge or intuition, like journaling or taking walks, or whatever we do to sort of touch base with ourselves and ground day to day. That's brought in here, and dedicating ourselves to such practices, even without immediate results, short-term results, right? You can stay connected to something and let those results pay out over time. Saturn leaves Pisces summer 2025, 3 months. Saturn leaves Pisces for good, February 2026. And so we're right in the middle of some longer term Saturn and Pisces new foundation laying. Someone said that earlier, there was a phrase I liked, and I can't, I'm going to add this here. I forgot that I can add these comments. So it was add script, intensification of current longstanding difficulties. You can just reform that, intensification of longstanding, commitments that are taking a while, right? And that is embedded in here to the moment in time, Saturn being in the third house. And then it's also local and sibling relationships, highlighting the importance of those closer connections to us. So all of those close family besties and close friends in our inner circle, and how they might, that's sometimes the most stability we might have. Life's a mess, emotions are a mess, but there's that one friend, you can always get coffee with, and they're going to be stable. They're always there, right? I think that's something to look out for if you're needing that. And Saturn and Pisces implies that. Okay, let me see here. Reaffirmation of commitments to artistic efforts in times of deep pain. Yeah, beautiful delineation. And I think that's really a major theme of this moment. Thank you, Ad Script. I appreciate that. Okay. This is a song I've been listening to a lot lately, even before I looked at this chart, but the Velvet Underground and Nico, it's called I'll Be Your Mirror. It's one of their songs. I think it's on their first major record, and which was called, I think, Velvet Underground and Nico. I guess it was released as a single. I pulled this out with the song All Tomorrow's Parties. But, I'm thinking this is a big part of the moment where you have relationships, whether it's the third house bestie style or that primary other of the Cancer stellium. You see the trine between Saturn and Pisces and all the planets in Cancer. That's the relational houses, 3 and 7. So that there may be some kind of person or relationship that's coming up to mirror and trigger the past, right? All the stuff we talked about earlier, Saturn and Capricorn. And so you might ask, who is mirroring yourself back to you at this time? Who is your mirror right now? Check that track out if you haven't heard it. It just slowly builds into the final repetition of the line, I'll be your mirror, where Nico they really come in with a bunch of, voices. And it's just so beautiful. Probably one of my favorite Velvet Underground songs. But it's the moon, Saturn, Venus, 1st, 3rd, 7th, self, really closer relationships, and then 7th house, primary dyadic relationships as a core theme of the moment we're in. Saturn is ruled by Venus in Pisces by exaltation. The moon is ruled by Saturn by domicile. So we're flowing between these houses. And it's very much internalized energies, earth signs and water signs. And so, okay. And also the Mars-Venus sextile in Taurus Cancer. More relationship inner workings as theme, because Mars and Venus are planet of relationships. Let me see if I can get a slide with the chart here. Here it is. Back to the full moon chart, but you can see how Mars here is applying, or actually Venus is moving faster, so applying to Mars. But they're about to complete a sextile, the first sextile they've perfected in years, actually, because of the Venus retrograde and the way their cycle has been syncopated. This is that first sextile that completes since they conjoined back, what was it, earlier in the year? I forgot the exact, I think January or February. But look for this again, Mars and Taurus ruled by its aspecting very closely and applying to its domicile lord, receiving it. And that's very supportive energy for like sharing needs in our relationships, right? So it's that aspect is another major component of this whole theme I've been bringing in. And I have here as the final slide, Alyssa, thank you for saying that. I'm really glad that the derivative houses has added so much. To me, it did too. I mean, I've used it in different contexts, but once I realized that I do it, you can do it a lot. It's for any, like you'll see astrologers on social media. They'll be like, what is 10th from, the 10th from the 10th. So the career of your career is the 7th, right? So there's all of these techniques that people do for derived houses. It goes back to Thaddeus Fallon's running derived houses from the Lot of Fortune as an alternative ascendant. But basically, you can just run derived houses from anything. I like it to analyze aspects because it tells us the nature of the aspect. It's not just sextile. There's a reason why the 3rd and 1st are in a sextile relationship, because our close associates can flow and support who we are. So I feel like for me, it really provides a depth for aspect theory. And that's mainly one of my favorite ways to use it. So I'm really happy. That it's helping you with that. Really cool. I love it too. So, okay. Processing pain is best. I want to just say this as a final point. I know I'm all about relationships and family and kids and mirrors and all of that. But look, Saturn is so-called prison. It can be isolation. That's a key word for Saturn. I put it in quotes because I don't mean literal prison. But sometimes processing pain, Saturn and Capricorn, or Moon and Capricorn, is best done in solitude before sharing those insights. And I think setting everything else aside, having a Moon in Capricorn, maybe it's best of needing to kind of pull away a little bit and then just build, right? The Saturn Mars energy over Capricorn, it's building in solitude, building in silence. They call it monk mode. I've seen sometimes on social media where you just kind of step away and you go into monk mode. And that might be what you need to do here right now. And I wouldn't force any kind of intimacy, especially if you're really, really tender with some of the Capricorn moon energy. So if you're going it alone and the pain that can induce, I wouldn't say that differently. It's that sometimes the pain induces us to go alone because that's, we're really the only one that can understand ourselves ultimately. I mean, we know ourselves better than anybody knows us. We've lived in our bodies and lived our lives, and so I think sometimes this is like maybe why the moon rules Capricorn by nitriplicity, is that we are best suited to tend to our own bodies and our own needs, actually, at some level. And at some seasons of life, we're the only ones who can actually do it. So maybe that's part of what is happening for you here. And I want to just say, I know I'm talking about these really supportive aspects, but we're right in the middle of a Saturn-Jupiter square, a mutable Saturn-Jupiter square. That Jupiter and Gemini energy has been here for only about a month, even less than a month now. That hasn't been really easy, has it? I don't know about you all, but I mean, it's kind of been majorly chaotic and really unwieldy. And, that's happening in the backdrop of everything we're describing here. It's overwhelming chaos. This might not be the easiest time simply because of that square, and that's still embedded here in this chart, and so I don't want to ignore that. And I also don't want to ignore the nodal trigger here, where we're triggering the eclipse axis. So it's not like, again, this is softer and easier, but not softest and easiest, as I was saying earlier. Okay, let's flip. Now I think this is towards the end here. Let me see, add script. What you end up doing if your mood is in Cap, stepping away to build in monk mode. Yeah, the accuracy here is deadly. Okay, glad you're resonating with it. And, monk mode is sometimes the best mode. You can get a lot done. I like partnership too. I think partnership can be wonderful, but monk mode can be, for some of us, is the kind of the best mode. Here is this election for the waning phase. Trying to pick the best little moment here. And what I decided to pick was this Aries moon. It's tricky because you got the moon in Aquarius squaring Mars. You've got the moon in Pisces conjoining Saturn. The moon in Aries is with the North Node. The moon in Taurus is with Mars. The moon in Gemini squares Saturn. So there's not the best options here for this little waning phase. We're in a time when there's really no axis, mutable, fixed, or cardinal, that is free from challenge. And so what that means is you have to come in and try to find like which sub pockets of each transit might be the better sub pockets. I just picked this one for a few reasons. One is that you get that very close application to Venus and Mars. So even though Mars is the domicile ruler of Aries, you see that not receiving the moon, Mars gives over immediately to Venus, and then Venus does aspect the moon. So, I thought that was some kind of mitigation. The moon is aspecting Jupiter. The moon is aspecting Venus. So the moon has benefic hits. The moon is in a mutual reception with the sun, domicile to exaltation. So that's kind of cool to have the mind and body fusing in a flywheel. And there may be that we're able to sort of tap into our initiations here in a way, or rest a little bit, potentially better or easier as the moon's waning, having a sun-moon mutual reception. This moon is safe from Mars and Saturn, averse to both. And the only wrinkle is that there's that North Node. And that's why I would say get it early in Aries, trying to get it applying to either Jupiter or the sun in those early degrees. I got a chart for Miami here that I picked. And that Miami chart, you can get Venus right on the ascendant and the moon right on the midheaven. And that's a pretty cool energy, I think, all things considered, to get those 2 points accentuated with the angles. But my quick delineation here, just rest in your power. It's still all the restful energy. Maybe that Aries moon is like us feeling some of our power, but then we're back to kind of resting in power a little bit. So it doesn't change too much of what I was saying earlier, but it's just the one that I would offer to you. Happy solstice to you, Shannon. Thank you very, very much. Slugbug, thank you so much as well. Happy solstice. Absolutely, everyone. The beauty of our reality. This solstice time is a really, really good time to just appreciate the beauty of astrology, especially tropical astrology. It's all about the solstices and equinoxes. Wendlung is a Libra rising Pisces sun. I have been in deep monk mode. Yeah, Libra rising here. I'm feeling a lot of monk mode coming on. I'm thinking I want to go more monk mode here soon, just to kind of grapple with the rest of the year. I've been thinking a lot about monk mode. Caroline, Neptune squaring the sun today, and the moon will square Neptune tomorrow, hours before the full moon. Did you talk about that? I didn't. I logged in late and may have missed it. I didn't. I'll talk about it a little bit here when we come to the Q&A section next. I can kind of layer in Neptune, but I didn't, mainly because I'm focusing a lot on rulership here and just some more traditional delineation techniques. The thing about Neptune, and it's really important, actually, there's a whole thing that I'll come to here when I get to the Q&A. I'll start with that question. Okay, so let me go to the next slide. Okay, here's my final slide for this phase of the talk. Go to my website, schedule astrology readings if you want with me. That's where we can go into all of this stuff, but then your chart has its own symbolic map that is actually the most important thing. Everything we've talked about in this video is another layer of triggering, but when you have one-on-one conversations, you really are able to come into the specificity of someone's life using their natal chart. But you can just go to my website, sjanderson144.com, just click that, and that'll take you into my schedule. Okay, let's just open it up. I mean, I can stay with you for a while here, and hey, what's good? TS, yeah, thanks. Yeah, just glad to be with you. We'll take some questions here, and and then we can wind down. I think I'm going to do this and just open this up, get a little bit bigger in here. And I'm going to start with Caroline's question. She was saying Neptune is squaring the sun today. So that just finished. And I believe that the sun has now just entered Cancer, or will soon. Let me see here. Where are we? Sun, not quite in Cancer, just about to here in just actually moments. It's 29 degrees, 59 degree minutes where the sun currently is. I'm looking at my Astro Gold. You all can't see that. But yeah, I mean, listen, this is the reason my thing on Neptune right now. Let me get back to a slide. Here we go, so we can check it out. Look, I look at Neptune, Pluto, and Uranus as transpersonal, generational, more mundane trigger planets as like my first layer of interest in them. Coming into delineating from a more traditional rulership model, they're a little bit de-emphasized for me, and so that's just my first answer to you, Caroline. It's not that they're not important; they're extremely important. The reason why Neptune, in my view, is a major player, and in 2025 and in 2026, Neptune will become the story. We're actually with the month of 2024, where Saturn and Neptune are the story in June 2024, because they are as close as they will be in 2024. And in 2025, next summer, both Neptune and Saturn will be co-present in Aries all summer together. That co-presence, which is June, July, August 2025, is a preview of the whole new reality that will be brought into with the conjunction of Saturn and Neptune right in the first degree of the zodiac that happens in February 2026. And so that is why Neptune, the sun is locally triggering it right here at the end of Gemini as we record this. And that may call to mind, I think what it calls to mind, Caroline, just that one other symbolic layer is the square of Saturn and Jupiter and this mutable square energy. To have the sun trigger Neptune, we're just getting this kind of morass of chaos and mutability and all of the kind of wild, chaotic overwhelm of this mutable square. And we have that solar trigger to Neptune that I think adds to it. So that would be my just quick answer there, but on that level. But on the other level, it's that 2025 and 2026, this is the story, Saturn, Neptune. And now there's other major stories, but this is like the major story. And I've done a whole video on this with Dan Waits on World Astrology Report. You can check it out. Go to YouTube and search, I think it's called The New Frontier, on his channel, World Astrology Report. And we broke this down. And so this is also why all of those stories we looked at earlier in the talk, the news stories, are also about 2026, because they're foretelling and they're foreshadowing Saturn and Neptune joining, as this is the month where they're as close as they'll ever be in 2024. So, okay, that would be my short answer there. Let me get to this next question. Thanks, Caroline, for that. Capricorn Sun Cancer Ascendant with Ruler stellium in the fourth house, hoping all is well for all of us and that we all heal. So Fireside Witch, I hope so too. Enjoy that Cancer new moon. I don't know how close it is to your sun and ascendant, but I think it's a good time for you to kind of refresh some selfhood here, refresh selfhood in maybe more of a kind of Cancerian model here, late June, early July, with this softer energy. That's a cool opportunity, I think, for all Cancer risings over the next month, is to just get that new self, let that kind of new self get born out here a little bit, for the stepping stones you're riding on into the future. All right, let's see any other questions. Another one. Oh, and thank you for introducing me to Cam White. Also, he's a Spitfire. Yep, Cam's awesome. Good friend of mine. Spitfire, I think, is an accurate term for Cam. Love his work, and I'm glad that I can work with him occasionally. And great to have colleagues in this space and friends. So, yep, shout out to Cam. Okay, Amanda B, thank you. When the sun will aspect the nodes coming next. Something in relation to the transitions from last April to the next September eclipse season. Absolutely, Amanda. I mean, everybody's got a story, and I would just say come into your cardinal axis. So like, for example, here's a Cancer rising chart. We're looking at this Miami, Florida, 28 June 2024, that election that I was talking about. In fact, I don't think I gave that exact date earlier when I was talking about it. I hope I did. But so let's say this person is a Cancer rising. Well, they've been having an eclipse story through their 10th house and 4th house of career, house of home. And maybe they're changing jobs or realizing, hey, they've had an unexpected ending of one job and then the arrival of a new job, or they moved unexpectedly. And so when you have the pings to the nodal axis, when we have cardinal syzygies all month, it calls into mind just maybe another echoing or another wave of a trigger of those ongoing stories. Excuse me, I just hit my mic, but of those ongoing stories. And then it may be bringing in for that person too, how the self and how the relationship are impacted by those ongoing stories. But, primary theme of astrology is angularity. And so anything in the cardinal axis will trigger the eclipse stories, which are cardinal axis eclipses. And those eclipses are so powerful, they might export to the 1st house and the 7th house. That's another primary theme of any transit. It exports to any of the cardinal, the angular positions. And so, yes, it's a big, let's just go with like a hypothetical. Let's say they started a new job in that last eclipse season with those April eclipses. And now maybe they're learning about how that job is right for them, or the new unexpected layers of why that happened or why that was their fate or something like that. So, okay, let me go to the next question. Thank you for asking these. Tips for starting a personal practice or learning how to begin professional training. Yeah, I have a video on my channel, How to Learn Astrology Fast. You can just type that in, and that's my tips for how to learn. And I would just say that might not be a personal practice per se, but personal practice, just follow the moon. Use the website astroseek.com, and you can always click on your chart. I don't know exactly there, but you can kind of poke around, and there's ways to always see where the moon is in your chart, and just follow the moon every time it changes into a new house in your chart. See if you can tap into those house topics in your life. That's always a good way to start a personal practice. Basically, just become obsessed with astrology. Think about it 24/7, and that's what happened to me. But I would just say, say that differently. Regular engagement with it. Reading all the books you can get your hands on. Major positive way to become an astrologer and to work with astrology. And learning how to begin professional training. I would say there's courses out there, and some of the popular courses I know about, Chris Brand's courses. Let's see, Adam Ellenboss has courses. Sam Reynolds has courses. A lot of astrologers will have their own course model, and maybe you can just, start feeling into one you resonate with and see if their courses might be an option for you. Not everybody does that. You don't have to do that, but whether you're taking a course with a teacher or regimenting your own training, I think you'll need to start engaging textually and, every day, opening up your ephemeris and your charts and reading books. And it's just that, that's really the only way to learn. So, let me see here. Owen Bottom, I'm not sure here. Become Who, AFR. If you want to clarify that, I'll come back to you. Thanks for that question. Astrology monk into house. Absolutely, Cynthia. Love those astrology monks out there. Does anyone know of a digital wall clock that tells astro daily placements? I don't, Slugbug, but maybe someone else out there is. Let's see. Jonathan Dent, what's up, sir? Really glad to see you, man. I miss your threads on X Twitter. Jonathan writes amazing threads and just amazing astrology on X Twitter. Yes, I'm grateful for you guys, and I'm really happy to be sharing and just glad to be doing a live again. I really like lives. I'm hoping to keep doing more. So beautiful. Great live. Actually, thank you so much, Amanda. Okay. Much appreciated taking all this down. Awesome. Well, I think maybe we'll, another question if there is one. And if not, maybe we'll kind of wind it down and turn it down. Let me see here. Cynthia, I have the Astro Gold app that shows it. Yeah. I mean, just to say for you guys, I have Astro Gold and I always carry it. I can press this button at the top and it just shows me the current placements. You don't need the app. You can use astroseek.com or astro.com. they have, if you just go to your search engine and type AstroSeek current planets, the first link or the second link in the search results are going to be the part of the page on their website where it shows you the current planets. And AstroSeek I love because you can animate those planets, but you can always just like start your day, check in, where are the planets, what's going on with the planets. That's just certainly one way to do it. Okay, here, let me just see here. Maybe final question, personal excavation. Thanks for asking it. Would you say Neptune opposing your natal moon is a blockage? I would say it could manifest that way for sure. And I think that it would become a process in the lifetime of working how to make it your friend, and there might be times when, disassociating with the body could be a delineation there. I think with any opposition, it's always like, there's a seesaw, and sometimes the Neptune might become too much, and then that moon is not emphasized. And then there might be times when the moon would need to take more prominence and like getting grounded in the physical instead of being maybe dissipated mentally or psychically. And so that would be the dance you're on. I think through the lifetime, you'll probably learn how to modulate that. But I would certainly say that it could be a form of a blockage, but also opportunities. I mean, you might be able to capture at times like a full Neptune thing where you're able to leave the body or something like this. And I could see that being very useful if you're able to play that and kind of come into those powers. All right, one more. Wondering about the Neptune squares on the Cancer Capricorn moon are indicating a tropical storm Alberta making landfall, causing flooding. Potentially, Caroline. I mean, that's a whole field of hurricane astrology, and I wish it's not something or weather astrology. I am concerned. I mean, just in general, squaring to a planet like Neptune, which would be a deluge in Pisces, which is a sign of deluge, that is cause for a little bit of a concern, just symbolically, to have the nodal squares to Neptune, that maybe, I would want to run some researches about when Neptune has been squaring the nodes, maybe in water signs, maybe there's something that can be resonant here. We can kind of find out some kind of history around these tropical storms. But yeah, symbolically, it's not easy, and especially Neptune, Saturn getting really close, squaring those nodes, and then having the local planets triggering all of those squares. You do wonder about water problems and flooding and all of those things. So I'll check into Alberto. I haven't been aware of that yet. Hopefully it's not going to be too much damage. Okay, let us end there. Look, it's been great to be with you, everybody, and I appreciate you out there. Thanks for watching this, and take care of yourself. And I'll talk to you all really, really soon. July's video will be out. I'm going to have that July forecast video in my normal style coming out here very, very soon. So look for that, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.